And so I'd like to have your thoughts on this subject, the collective aspect of deliberate practice.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is that this stuff all revolves around the same basic idea, which is that virtually all of the deliberate practice research at this point across a variety of different disciplines points to this thing that the researchers in various ways call the supporting environment. And the supporting environment is essentially everything else beyond you, your instrument in the practice room, that you are cultivating and sort of architecting to enhance your project, which is your process and your trajectory and everything else. And I think all of the different examples you cite are sort of different manifestations of how that can work. But one of the, I think, underlying kind of caveats or admissions, I suppose, in all of this is sort of being honest with ourselves as human beings, which is to say that we can aspirationally hope to do a great deal, and we try to make plans, and it's a good thing that we're often really optimistic in all of this, and then reality intervenes, and then it's a lot harder in practice to get stuff done on time, or learn as much rep as you'd wanted to, or get as many practice hours in before this audition as you were hoping, and on and on and on, right? And to be clear, like that never ends. Like I still struggle with this on a daily basis in my position at the Met. And so what the supporting environment accomplishes is a variety of sort of safeguards. It's almost like checks and balances, guardrails on our behavior and our decisions to keep us as positively focused on our sort of original intentions as possible, right? And sometimes, in the example you mentioned, it can be identifying an arch nemesis, somebody with who you can compete, so that it's like this competitive drive is what is fueling you to get more work done, right? Now, I think there are pros and cons to that approach. I think it can vary by discipline and by field, but to be perfectly honest, I mean, one of the things I try to encourage my students to think about is getting away from this idea of competing with other individuals. Because so much about, I think, high level music performance and the sort of related performance psychology is recognizing that you're really only competing with yourself, right? In a given performance, in a given audition, you are going in there to do your best job, and you're not really so much worrying about what other people are doing. You can't control that. In certain sports frameworks can be useful in making this analogy, right? I think the idea of the arch nemesis is like, for tennis aficionados, Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, right? These are two, incredibly skilled tennis players who continue to see themselves in, the quarter and semifinals and finals of, the Wimbledon and US Open and all this other stuff. They are competitors directly, and one's performance impacts the other. And at the end of the day, it's a zero-sum game. Mm-hmm. I don't think music is like that. Music is a lot more like golf, right? You're going out there and you're just trying to do your best. And, you're not directly interacting with the other people against whom you are sort of quote unquote competing. And so again, I think the arch nemesis thing is variously useful in different contexts. What I do think is a lot more relevant to musicians is this notion of like, runners coming from families of other people who do this. It's exposure, and it's an environment that creates a lot of incentives to do the right thing and creates disincentives to not do the wrong thing, right? And to a large extent, like as musicians, we get this in school. School is sort of our first major supporting environment where you are now, surrounded by other reasonably like-minded individuals who have similar goals and with whom you can, share ideas and practice strategies and musical insights, and you can socialize with them, and you can be a, sort of an emotional support network and all of this other stuff. And that is really, really essential. I don't know of, major examples of people who were able to make incredible progress in a discipline without having that sort of environment. Yeah. And there's a couple interesting parts of the same book, Deep Work, that examine this idea, because there's this sort of like there's the myth of like the isolated mad scientist, you know, that like you get somebody who's just like so completely dedicated to their thing. They go off to an island and they live by themselves for 10 years and they come back and they've cured cancer or something, right? And like that doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Like that's just never a thing that's happened. And what he talks about in the book is that people have looked for this. They've tried to find case studies like, okay, can we find somebody who has learned an incredible amount and, really made substantial contributions to the field and done all of this sort of like a solitary monk on top of the mountain without interacting with anyone or cross-pollinating or having the supporting environment? And the answer so far is no. They can't find examples of people who do this. Now, of course, there's a subtlety to this, which is you need both. You need, again, it's sort of like the idea of breadth and depth all over again. You need a network of people. You need a supporting environment that you can learn from, rely upon, interact with, get inspired by, learn from in a sort of amplifying context. But then you also need, obviously, a lot of solitary time by yourself to just go do the work. And, composers like Mahler and his frenemy Strauss were, great examples of this. Mahler had his little composing hut in the woods, in the mountains, but he was also like very much a man about Vienna. And, he would interact with other people and he was conducting it, so he had both the breadth and the depth going on. And that was what was kind of fueling his project.